Welcome to our next talk. It's What is Stopping Us? A Legacy Code Question by Lorraine Steyn. Please welcome the speaker.
Yes, good afternoon. Terrible session just after lunch. Hope you're awake. Glad to see more faces. So yeah, I'm Lorraine Steyn. I know the Germans all battle a bit with that surname. I come from Cape Town. It's a very windy city. I love to go hiking, and I still have a t-shirt from the last time I was in Berlin. So what we are going to talk about is we're going to talk about teams and code and applying systems thinking to that. So if for any reason you think we're going to do, because we mentioned legacy code, if you think we're going to do refactoring or anything, you're welcome to leave, because we're just applying systems thinking to some of our industry problems. Cool. So I really remember when coding was fun. You know, that so many of us got into this because, you know, that first time something compiled moment, and, you know, the sheer joy of creating things. And I do think that in our jobs, that we often lose that fun. We lose that joy, and I think it's very, very unfair. So let us look at some of the dysfunctions, the things that go wrong, and also how we can apply systems thinking levers to having a better working experience. I'm going to talk about things that go wrong. I don't mean they go wrong for everyone all of the time, but I hope as I go through some of the dysfunctions, you'll probably relate to some. Okay, so I'm not always going to stop and say, you know, like, not all code. But please understand that. It's just that every time I've seen a multi-person team, a software that has existed for more than a few months, it seems to be headed for the big ball of mud. Now, we're at a DDD conference. I hope I don't have to explain every term, but I mean, that's generally what we call that glued together, you know, not loosely coupled mess. And it just seems that it's like the default place that code goes to. I've got this picture, another slide I've used before, of an avalanche. It's like you start coding and it's all pristine, clear, pretty snow, and at some point it's all lying in a mess at the bottom. Right, in amongst the rocks. Yeah, so why? You know, what is stopping us from doing better, really? And when I say us, I mean not all of us. I think we all want to do the best, all right? So please, everything I say, understand that my starting point is things are stopping us. Okay, but you know, I mean, the other assumption would be, are we stupid? You know, why does this happen to us? So this chap, W. Edwards Deming, he's better known for Toyota processes and stuff, but actually I think he is a really, really fantastic management guru that would be well for people to rediscover. But he says it's our systems that are getting in the way. It's the way we're managed. He says 85% as failures in the process and the systems that support us. He also says, which I really love, he says it's a manager's job to manage the system and not the employees. So, I mean, I love this. So instead of flogging, you know, your team, let's work overtime, could you fix the things that are stopping them doing a good job? So that's pretty much the focus. Okay, so number one, I've got 5 main dysfunctions coming up. One is bad management. Is that relatable? Okay, I see enough nods. Right, we've all had them, you know, one of those managers. I hope we're not them. But sometimes we are because we don't know better. So hopefully I'll give you some tips and tricks. And Deming himself, by the way, he has a... He was a grumpy old bastard. And he didn't really tolerate a lot of stuff. He had things that he said like, doing your best isn't good enough. You need to know what to do. So he's quite an interesting thinker. There's a talk in there all just on that bloke. Okay, number 2 is our working environment. This is so simple. It's really so simple. We should have a work environment that is conducive to work. And yet I once saw a thing which said, you know, in the older offices, hopefully most of us are now remote. Are you remote? Yes. A lot of remote workers. It's got its own challenges. But in the office world, you used to walk through the front door and your time went through a shredder. Meetings, people, demands, you know, it was just really hard to keep chunks of it together. So there's, again, a very old study back from Peopleware. I mean, the study is, 40 years old or something by now. No, not quite that old. They did a study on, I think it was 35 organizations, and I've got notes somewhere. There's somewhere around 200 programmers. And they were all given the same thing to develop, but in teams. The top performing teams versus the bottom performing teams, they looked at what was different in the environment. All right. And I mean, it might be an old study, but I find it relatable. People with a little more space, they generally did better. Teams with less distractions did better. And Peopleware came up with this idea at the end of it that there are 10x companies or 10x environments, but not 10x programmers. And, you know, I mean, this idea that some of us are just so much better than others of us. It also tends to be that when you're working with great people, you do better. So great teams create great teams, like one of those really nice things. Okay, so if you look at all of that stuff going on there about feeling appreciated, those teams did better, I think it's relevant. And these are quite easy things to fix, except modern offices, for some obscure reason, this is what the developer types think we want. I don't know about you, but every time I see one of those things, my first thought is, where's the blinds? I can't see the screen when there's all that glare. And yet it's considered like the beautiful modern office, and it's just so wrong for us, right? I don't know if the rest of you have the same, like, I look at this and I go, I can't work there. But by comparison, the home office for me, it's personalized, it's warm, it's like, it's got cats, it's near a kitchen. You know, these are like, it's just so much better for me working remote. And I know for some people there's isolation and there's family thinks you're not really working. And there are other challenges to solve, but I think the whole industry took a step for the better when most of us got to go remote. I think we got rid of some of that problem. Problem number 3 is basically, I call this the infrastructure and tools problems. When we talk about legacy and big balls of mud, most of us want to go and learn how to refactor code. Those are small little incremental things we can fix. But actually sometimes there's a pillar in the way. You can't fix it by painting it. It has to go. So I also always like us to, and it's going to be a systems thing, that thing of taking a step back and just looking at what is such a blocker, that it has to be blown up. It can't be done in cute little increments. All right. So just keep that in your mind. We'll go back to the fixing. That bridge, that's quite a famous landmark in Cape Town. We, a long time ago, 45 years ago, I think, had grand plans to have flyovers over certain parts of the city. And I don't know if we ran out of money or will or whatever it was, or somebody said this is going to really destroy some quality of life for the buildings alongside. But they just stopped. And now for 45 years, we have half-done flyovers at different parts of our city. The movie industry loves them. They come and do chase scenes and cars going off edges. But yeah, some decisions are just so weird, right? When you've seen that in your code, you're like, who thought about this? I was going to talk a little bit more about DDD here as well, because the patterns, the strangler fig and the adapters and anything that hides what's going on behind. You know, we do know we have the tools for some of this stuff. But we often have to do like more brave stuff here. The fourth thing that gets in our way are our processes, whether they're agile or not. That is a Jira board from hell that one of my teams works with. Phew. You know, it all starts off so nicely. Management, teams, whoever, Scrum coaches get together and they design the board. It's going to have these columns. We're going to see where everything is. Maybe we'll categorize our tickets so we can see where things are coming in that aren't great. Nice. Gets rolled out. We all get our training. We've all heard about Jira, but we think, look, okay, it doesn't look that bad. Then reality hits. So in our case, duplicates. The same problem comes up. Almost every user reports it. We didn't have a column for duplicates. You can't just close everybody's. Now you spend a whole lot of time linking them all together. But okay, we have a meeting, we talk to all the departments, we get super users in place. And things will get routed through them. Now we only have maybe duplicates per department. Have any of you done this? Do you work with super users? Is it a term? Then it turns out the categories aren't working that well. Almost everything's going into 2 or 3 categories. The others are never used. I don't think anyone was going to ever look at those stats anyway, but we've all been diligently putting them in. But we have another meeting about that. Hey, it doesn't take long, and you're serving the process. The process is not serving you. And I just think we do that to ourselves, or it is done to us. But the thing is, when you're in there, you just do it, because it's expected of you. So I think that's how processes go mad. There's actually a real-life thing happening right now. I'm not a Scrum Master, I'm a developer. Who's a developer? Or was, or is, self-identified as? Good. But I do quite a bit of work with teams and talking Scrum Masters. Anyway, I joined the Scrum Master forum because I'm interested to see what the problems are, And someone is saying, in their team, somebody wants to split some stories. Should they allow it? Phew. So alarm bells, like the Scrum Master should allow it. I thought the Scrum Master was there to facilitate the team. And this huge argument went on about, well, if it's mid-sprint, then nothing can change. Did they want to move the work out? And I'm thinking, real people, you remember that individuals over process, real people have asked for something to happen. And all the Scrum Masters are busy quoting process at us. Maybe they will do safe. I can think of no other explanation. But it's really important to watch for runaway process. Because Agile said, people, individuals, over process. Anyway, that's my rant. And I think it's just that I feel like process-wise, we're all the boiled frog in the pot. The story is you keep turning up the heat, the frog doesn't jump out. I think that's us. The fact is the frog does jump out. Frogs are therefore cleverer than us. Because I'm still filling in those bloody Jira tickets. All right. So, we actually need to know when to say to somebody it's not serving us. So we had bad management, bad environment, bad infrastructure architecture, bad processes. The last one of the things I think really go wrong with us doing a good job is this idea that we're resources. So I've heard at the conference some people talk about human relations, which is nicer. In South Africa, we mostly refer to HR as human resources. It's a terrible term. It sort of implies we're all little Lego people. You can take one and you can plug another one in. And I think it's really not, I know it's really not true. We're just not interchangeable Lego bricks. And I'm going to talk about that a whole lot on Teams. Let me see what's coming up next. Okay, so that was number 5. Bring in the systems thinking. Whatever your environment is that's going wrong, the systems in that environment are perfectly designed for the result you're getting, because you're getting it. Okay. I find that both horrifying and encouraging, because it means I can change the system. All we've got to do is we've got to find leverage points. It's not that the people are bad. It's not that, because people problems are quite intractable. But system problems you can change. You can change the systems around people. So I really like that a lot. So we're going to do a fly-through systems thinking. I think it's repeated quite often in the conference. I'll try not to repeat things that you've maybe heard. But if you have no idea what systems thinking is, you'll get an idea at the end of this. One of the main things, it's about looking at the whole. So I've talked about a whole bunch of factors, but you have to start forming a picture of everything. And because everyone here is a developer, I'm going to sort of say there's a high chance you're detail-oriented people. That the big picture stuff doesn't come as naturally. Okay, so we've got to watch that in ourselves. Okay, and also, it's not a system unless it has a purpose. Hopefully your job is worthy and it has a purpose and your team has a purpose, but the system is also defined. You have to kind of figure out the purpose to also understand what all is interacting. Now I'm going to start at the sort of bottom end of systems. Systems have feedback loops. Something in the system is responding to something else. Okay, and those loops, if you can start to figure out what is triggering what, you can sort of work your way back up the chain to see what's affected, what's in the chain. Okay, so we're going to start right at the bottom and talk about the loops, the feedback loops that exist in every system. A system wants to be stable. So the most general state is a balancing loop. It's fairly easy to understand. I'm too hot, I take my jersey off, temperature's back in balance. Our systems as humans can't really be out of balance, or we're on our way to death or something, right? So the balancing loop is the normal state of affairs. And then the really interesting and dangerous one is the reinforcing loop. So I use the stampede picture because if you know how animals work, when herd animals, when one starts to run, the others run. So the one reinforces the other until you have a whole stampede, and then they're almost impossible to stop. But they do stop. Reinforcing loops will run out of steam, but they could have trampled everything there. So in human terms, if you've ever noticed a team getting unhappy, they seem to get unhappier faster. It's sort of reinforcing. One person's really unhappy, and it makes the other guy and his other teammates unhappy too, and then they're all unhappy. Okay, so some of the human behavior stuff is reinforcing, and it's much harder to stop the negative reinforcing stuff usually than the positive. You get positive reinforcing too. You put money in the bank, you get interest. Then you have more money, which gets more interest. That's a positive reinforcing loop. Okay, you don't usually want to stop them, and they do run out of steam too. I wanted to play a little game. We've run this, I do systems thinking at other conferences, and we did a workshop where we handed out cards and asked everyone to sort of try and figure out the loop. So I'm going to do it with you just to make sure you're awake. Here is the statement, and we've got to figure out what loop is possibly happening. Is it a balancing loop, reinforcing? What are we looking for? So it says, a team has a deadline. What's the loop if management asks for limited overtime? I'm happy to take any suggestions. Balanced, yeah. So too much work, put in extra hours, back in balance. So long as you got it right. So long as the work wasn't more than the hours you asked for. Okay. So that's the balancing. This is the other one now. And this is what normally seems to happen with overtime. It keeps going because it wasn't really a balanced loop. There was too much work for the time they asked. So we asked for more time. And we get tireder. So our time's worth less. And we ask for more time. So we get tireder. You see how the negative reinforcing loop can spiral from quite an innocent, let's put a bit of extra effort in. Okay. I have a couple of packs of these little cards if you want to play them out with your teams, and you can ask them after the talk. Okay. In systems thinking, we talk about, so we're moving up So once you can identify the things going wrong, is it balancing, is it reinforcing? That's a good place to start. Now you look, what's coming in, what is the stock you have and what flows out? I hate the term stock myself because it sounds so physical. And for us, it's usually about value. This value flows in and value flows out. So if you can adapt it more to that, because all the examples are like the bathtub. You fill it, you pour it out, what happens? That's a system. I did a coffee version because, hey, we're devs. And if somebody doesn't say what makes devs happy, oh, coffee, I've missed my calling. So you put things into the pot. If the stock of coffee is what you want, things go in. You pour cups of coffee off, you have less coffee, but you also have evaporation, it gets cold. So there's a couple of ways that it can lose value as coffee. As I say, think about it as value more than as the stock. And what else did I want to tell you about that one? Okay, let's look at it in a systems thinking diagram. Now, these are causal loop diagrams. Personally, I'm so bad at them. If you're good at them, great. But I don't know. But I like to have something to scribble because it helps me sometimes to figure this out. So the coffee was what we said. The Donella Meadows book that so many people will quote to you draws these diagrams with little taps. I quite like it because it just reminds me you can have more of it come in or less. Your flows are often things you can manage. It's not like you just have to have lots of it. So what we try and do with our backlog, we manage it, right? The outflow the same. You have some goal, and then you also have some error state, something that the feedback loop is telling you, and the B's would indicate it's a balancing loop because, hey, coffee doesn't it's not really it doesn't make more of itself or do anything kind of reinforcing. Not enough coffee, full pot, balanced. All right. It's simple. You happy with that? Because we're going to do a very similar diagram with people, and then it gets a bit weirder. So right. That was that state. People. This is actually my team. We're all remote, and we're on joins for staff meetings and various things on Zoom, and it all got much more complicated when we went in person. It seems like, the idea that you can just walk up to someone and sort of deal with your problems is a little harder remote. So you've got to look at the systems a little more. Anyway, let's take the scenario where somebody has said, we've got a new project, I need a team of 6 people. Okay, that would make the team a stock, wouldn't it? You put people into it. Yeah? Hopefully there are people with skills. You would, you put the environment in, the distractions and the bad chairs and the no blinds. You put in your policies and your processes and your JIRA and your, whatever. No phones in the office and all the things that make people unhappy. I know, personal. And then the outflows, people leave, so you can put more people in. We lose skills because we forget or tech changes and our skills aren't relevant. So the value in the people can change over time, yeah? We can get unhappy, and that would make us less team. Okay. The trouble with something like this is that this is this is actually a typical management view of Lego people. We're just so much more complicated than that. You can't just take one out and put one in. So I'm going to sort of expand on that, but if you're ever trying to draw this out for your teams or talk through it, you could start there, but you've got to think of a lot more loops, the things that are affecting that team. Just for instance, the idea of happiness. I said stock could be a value. Could happiness be a stock? I wish I could have the big box of happiness and just distribute it. I'd be so happy. It would be wonderful. Unhappy team, here you go. Right. So we do store it a bit. If you generally got a happy team, they sort of stay happy. quite hard to create, very easy to deplete. Much easier to make people unhappy than happy. And there are lots of feedback loops if you know where to look for them, though we often don't look. But anyway, so some of those things are really complicated to draw the diagrams and whatever. Last thing in systems thinking, a couple of last points here. Everything can be a system. If you're not careful with your boundaries, it just grows and grows and grows. So you have to start small. You have to start with what you can affect. If you want to learn to swim, the trick is you learn in a pool and not in the ocean. There's like some person being washed out to sea there, I think, in the way of... So you don't want to do the scary stuff. You must try and figure out what is the boundary that you're considering in the system. You must be prepared to look like beyond the obvious, what lies beneath. There was a whole iceberg thing as well, but I'm just stating the obvious. And then you've got to take different perspectives. The detail matters, but so does the big picture. So you've got to be able to move and shift a little bit between those points. Right, let's play a game again. Let's try and put code as the stock. Does it have value? I think so. That's why we have jobs. Can we store it? I think that's what Bitbucket and GitHub and these things have been doing for me. How does it gain value? It's not actually just by writing more of it. That's one option. And it actually gets less valuable. So we can explore some of those thoughts. I think one of the problems really is when we talk about the value of code, we're not just talking about the text. So I see code itself as a sort of three-part thing. It is text, right? There's definitely text. I know I type badly, but I type. But there's also mental models. So the maze is intended to represent a model of how things flow and the paths. And if you don't have the model, the text is much harder. I mean, you can't only have the model without the text. So they're chained, right? And it all rests on certain people's knowledge. So that model can be reduced to documentation. And you potentially could have different people. But if you change the people, you actually do change the model. You change the model, you're changing the code. And it's all three parts make what we consider valuable code, as well as with the fact that it must work. You know, work, business purpose, all of that as a given. Can I explore that mental model with you a little bit more? So the picture I have in my head is this maze. And the first generation programmers, the first team who does the first round of the code, they're like the builders of the maze. They know exactly how to get out. They know how to get from this part to that part. When somebody asks for another gateway because, you know, there's been a lot of children and they know exactly what to change and to make it a bit easier or to make it harder, or whatever they need to do. They know how to maintain it, how to trim it. You want to change, it's done quickly. Everyone, you know, the mental model is strong. And then the first generation, one or two of them leave and you bring in new people. And so long as there's still original code is there, they pass on a fair amount of the knowledge of the model. But it waters down, doesn't it? It's a leaky bucket, that knowledge transfer. Because I only understand a bit of what I'm told by the first generation. And then I pass on when I leave, I pass on only some to the next person. The bit I understood, and they understand a bit. And over time, that's what our code becomes. Somebody hacks through the hedge because they haven't the time to figure out the three paths to get around it. So they hack out a piece. Somebody else builds a scaffold over a pot so they can get up and look and then just go. Somebody else brings in another language. They put a different type of bush in because they couldn't be bothered to wait as long as is needed for this bush to grow. And this is our code. You know, once it's all scruffy, this is what we do to it. So that's my mental model picture that I really like and believe in. And unfortunately, that when I say first generation and second generation, it sounds like it's a long time. But it depends entirely on the turnover. It could be weeks. Okay, so the knowledge of how the code works can go very fast. And I think that's what we call software rot. You know, that idea that you haven't looked at code for a bit, and when you go back to it, it's not as good as it was. And we all do, you know, software rot is real. It's our brains, okay? Either we forgot what we did, we've learned more, so it looks bad, or we weren't the people who wrote it, and we have no idea anyway. Okay. Which brings me to this point. You change one member of the team, you change the team. Okay. Hopefully you all like the term immutable. I really, if nothing else sticks, we are not Lego blocks, and we can't be swapped out, because with us goes our models. And anyone who thinks that, you know, if Jim leaves, we can just get Sally, I don't understand the problem. Cool. So yeah, that was the sort of dysfunctions. I think it's about time we talked about solving some of them, eh? Although maybe you've gained a few little glimmers, because if any of these dysfunctions are part of your world, bad process, bad management. How about the tools and infrastructure one? How many people fight their tools? Is that relatable? Okay, not that many nods. Some. Yeah. It's just every so often you run into things and you're like, you know, if I could, the simplest is I do a lot of legacy work, and I find that nobody updated the database since, I don't know, SQL Server 2008, you know, it was a good vintage. and all you have to do is upgrade. And suddenly you've got a whole lot more options, and the team have not always done it. No one gave them the time, no one gave them the management support. So, you know, it's all of those dysfunctions again, that poor management. Anyway, that is one time it's nice to be a consultant, eh? Because you're being paid, so they have to listen to you. You know, so they've actually asked you for your opinion. I really like that. So I have a couple of options of things we could apply. But the trouble with talking about solution is that everyone's got different problems. So what I really want you to do is to be able to look for your feedback loops and sort of figure out what is reinforcing in the wrong direction, or what is stable that shouldn't be. When are we the boiled frog? You know, those sort of things. So then point number one really is to be able to take that holistic view of the problem. And if you're too deep in the woods, you know, to actually see the big picture, then it is actually worth getting somebody from outside to help look. But if I had a picture of me hiking. I was asked in one of the sessions, like, what's our thinking method? Yeah, mine is get out and have nobody talk to me for a bit so I can think about it. So sometimes you have to take the time if you can. Number two, I mean, just try and fix those obvious things. Get the blinds, or let people work from home, or get them a better chair, or... I think that modern organizations are getting better at this. I don't know, what's the worst environment anyone feels they work in? Do you feel that shredded thing? Any of you? How's that getting better? You all look like you've got better environments. There are a lot of teams that still don't. So, you know, we can just think about that. If we've got those big blockers, we've never upgraded something, we're stuck with something that's redundant, or we've got a pillar in the way, somebody has to go and strangle it out, right? So it's really important before you can do the simple refactory things. The processes must serve you. If they're not serving you, you've got to put your foot down. And you've got to treat your people not as Lego pieces. So let's look at one or two of those. Sustainable pace. You could see from my little card and that feedback loop, I'm really anti-overtime. I feel it's like one of those emergency measures that we get called on to do too often. So sustainable pace is like a real thing, and I know it drives some managers crazy because they're like, oh, you did, I don't know, you're doing story points. Shame if so. You did 30 story points last sprint, so, let's push for 32 and that sort of crap, So there's that. And if you need to explain why, you can't be forced to do too much work, think about the highway jam. You put too many things into the queue, everything stops. And I feel like that sometimes because this needs attention and I've got that, and then there's 3 more tickets, and then this client said it's a priority 1, and eventually you just aren't effective, so you got to block it. I just like this slide. This is for the blockers. I mean, if you've got the pillar in the way, you just got to go fix it. So there's some brave stuff I always ask for when we talk about refactoring code. It's a matter of interest. There's always this thing about what is the definition of legacy code. So Michael Feathers said it was code without tests. Okay? Because you couldn't safely change it. I've heard other people say it's just other people's code. Some people think it's old code, but that's a bit misleading because, quite honestly, I've seen old style code written right now. It's legacy the moment it hits the vault, Yeah, so all code to some extent is legacy in the sense that it's done. So when we talk about legacy, for me, it's all code because we always start off with these best intentions and something happens to our lives. All right. So some of them you've got to stop and say, no, we made a mistake there, we're going to fix it. Or somebody else made the mistake, if that's easier to say, but it's that ownership of we're not going to get home if we don't get that pillar fixed or that panel fixed or that whatever. Safety to fail. I know we talk about it, it's really hard, hey? I've had teams where the words were, it's safe to fail. But underneath that was, but please don't go and cost the company money. Which isn't really allowing failure, is it? Because, I think it is a really difficult thing. We all say you should have safety to fail, but actually when you fail, it's not really encouraged, in truth. So whatever you can do to create a safer environment, whether it's just that when it does happen, you maybe don't set out to do it, but if it does happen. So there's the 2 kinds, right? Something happened, we're just not going to jump on the person. We're going to say, it's okay, you learned. I know you brought production down. We all do, at least once if we're right. And you learned. Good. But there's the other kind as well. A truly experimenting team would plan to fail. Because otherwise you've learned nothing. That's the one that's really hard for most companies to take on board. I mentioned that back in that peopleware code wars analysis, right at the beginning of my slides, they said that the teams that had strong people seemed to, the whole team was strong. So teams are stronger together. So it's never a waste of time to invest in the training, the mentoring. I just have seen too many devs who don't mentor. It's like, oh, you're slowing me down, I've got a job to do. But you will learn nothing, right, with that sort of mindset. I've had mentors, I want to be a mentor. And sometimes we just forget because we're pressured. I don't think we mean to be mean, but we're pressured. I have a job to do, and now I'm supposed to help this junior, and they don't know what they're doing, and why is all the stress on me? But actually, if they had, you've got to keep lifting each other up. Rugby. Yeah? South Africans are crazy about rugby. So you have to keep lifting each other up to become a great team. Okay, so I'm close to wrap, which is nice because he was about to show me the 10 minutes so we can do Q&A. These are trees in Cape Town. They have absolutely bent for that wind. Okay, the wind has pushed them into shapes, and that's us. We adapt. We are adaptable people. It's just we shouldn't always. So just be careful that sometimes you're adapting to an environment you should have actually said no to. Okay. And I mean, I don't know, I hope those tips are useful, because you got this. And I have a whole bunch of referencey things. The obvious Donella Meadows, a couple of other great writers. So I'm at the moment quite into Deeming. He's got a very abrupt style, how things should be. But, there's a lot of value in there. There's a video, as well as the book. A lot of people have read the book. If you have a chance to read the video, it's ancient. I swear it must have been videoed on VHS. You know? But it's so amazing. I'm actually a cynic about vision statements. I don't know if you are. Because, oh, we're going to be the best. And what she says you need to do when you're solving problems is you need to envision where you want to go. She actually recommends, to close your eyes and imagine a perfect work environment. What would it be? What would make you excited to be getting out of bed? Back to that excitement we first had. What would that look like? When you know where you want to go, step 2 is you research how to get there. And then some might not be feasible. But don't ever start off by already saying, oh, that's impossible, we'll never get management to agree to that. Don't ever cut yourself off before you even start. All right. And then, of course, you have to implement, align, and roll out. So there's a lot of nice stuff from Donella. I'm available to take questions.